Well, greetings, people of the internet. Unky Joe here, Unky Joe's Playhouse. Today, forgive the audio quality of this video. My battery in my lavalier mic is out, and somebody left it turned on. I don't know who that could have been. My assistant, maybe. But anyway, today, another in the series of the Homelab series of videos. Another video in the Homelab series of videos is what I meant to say. So without further ado, let's get the video started right now. So what we're going to cover today, how to configure a DHCP server under Windows Server 2019. If you've been following my last live stream, you'll know that I recently decided to change my domain name from midearth.local to ujp.local. So today we're not going to work on a computer that's in the lab per se, but we're going to work on our actual domain controller here for Unky Joe's Playhouse to give you an example of how to do DHCP reservations. Now, if you don't know what a DHCP reservation is, say for example, let's take for example my cameras. Say that we want my cameras every time they boot up, regardless of whether there's been a software update to them or whether there's been a configuration change, a new password assigned, that they all come up and they get the same IP addresses. Now there's two ways to do this. We could go into the actual camera itself and hard code an IP address. The other way to do it, and the way I find is more efficient, is to every device on your network, or every network device I should say, has what's called a MAC address. And this is an address that is burned into the device at the factory where it's made. And if you know what that MAC address is, you can go into your DHCP server and you can reserve that a certain IP address based on what your MAC address is. It's how your ISP also gives you the same IP every time to your router at home if you have a hard-coded IP. Just one way to do it. I find it extremely helpful to know that every time this camera reboots or this device reboots, that it's going to get the same IP address. It just makes your life a whole lot easier, in my opinion. So that's what this video today is about, is showing you how to set up reservations using Windows Server 2019 DHCP servers. So let's get that training portion of the video started right now. Now the server we're going to be using today is the server for my domain for unkyjoesplayhouse.local or ujp.local. We're not going to actually use the Homelab server for this demonstration because I thought, what better way to show you how to configure DHCP, some of the options and reservations, than to do it in a real live network. So I've already installed DHCP. You saw me do that when we created the domain controller. So let's go into the DHCP server and just futz around so you can see where the settings are. So if you expand it, you have two settings. You have one for IPv4 and one for IPv6. We're not going to be dealing with IPv6 today. We'll just be dealing with IPv4. And if you remember in our previous Homelab video, we set it up and we configured the scope for DHCP. And that is right here. And so here's our address pool. I've given it a range from 5.30 to 5.99. Yours could be more or less depending on, what you need. Now it's very important, if you're going to do a reservation, don't include that IP address in the range of IP availables for distribution. You want to make sure that if you're going to reserve an IP, it's outside of this range. Now, if we come here to scope options, I've also configured my router or my gateway, my DNS server, which is the IP address of the server I'm currently on, and my internal DNS domain name, which is ujp.local. .local. Now, if we come up here to reservations, you're going to notice I already have a reservation set up, and that's at 5.154 for the front door camera. So if I right click on it and go to properties, you'll see I just give it a name. Now, it doesn't really matter what you call this up here in the reservation name, because it's going to change to whatever the host name you have set up on that device. What is important, though, is that you have the correct MAC address. So every device ever made, every networking device or device that's on a network, whether it be wireless or hardwired, is going to have what's called a MAC address, and it's an individual identification number. And then you can type whatever you want for the description, and I just put camera-FD. So let me show you how to do that. So what I want to do first is determine what my MAC address is. So I use another program to do that. Now I'm using a program called Lansweeper, and I've covered that before in another video. You can use something like Advanced IP Scanner, but basically what you're going to want to do is find out the MAC address of the device you're going to be reserving the IP address for. So, for example, say we want to do the backyard west camera. So if I hover over that, you'll see it tells me the IP and it tells me the MAC address of the device. So, and if I click on it, then I can even highlight the MAC address, right click, and copy it. Now, one of the problems with copying the MAC address this way is it has the colons in there. And when you go to reserve an IP address for this device, you're going to need to be mindful and to remove those colons out of that MAC address. So let's go do that next. So I'm back at the DHCP server, and I'm going to come up here to reservations, and I'm going to right click and do a new reservation. And again, we'll just call this, what did we say this was? Camera West, I think. So we'll call it that. Now what we need to determine is what IP address we want this camera to have. So let's go back, and I know I'm going to want it to be, let's see, 5.158. And you're saying to yourself, well, why are you doing a reservation? It's already at 5.158. Well, because I want to be able to turn DHCP on that camera, and we'll cover that after this. So 158 is the IP address we want to use. So we'll type that in there, 158. And then I'm going to right click and I'm going to paste that MAC address in there. And then what I'm going to do is go manually delete those colons. Okay, that's done. And then down here in the description, let's see what we called the camera. We called it Backyard West. So let's try to use the same name in our DHCP. So we'll do Backyard West. Okay, click on Add and then Close. And so now you see it's added the reservation at 5.158 for the West camera. So if I go here to Address Leases, you'll see that while the address is active for the front door camera, it's not active for the west facing camera. And what we need to do is we need to log into the camera at that IP and flip it into DHCP mode. So let's do that next. Now what I use is the Amcrest utility, and you'll see right here that I've got 5.158 is the camera there. Yeah, here we go. So we'll connect up via the web interface. And I should be able to come up here to Setup. And I should be able to go to System, Auto Maintain, Manual Reboot. Yes, there we go. Aha, it was right in front of me. So let's click on Manual Reboot. And then we're probably going to lose connectivity with that camera. So we'll go back over to our domain controller here, and we'll see if the camera gets a new IP address or gets that hard-coded IP. All right, so I've seen the camera come back up. So let's go ahead and refresh now on our address leases, and let's see if our reservation is active, and it is. Now you'll see though that it has adopted the name of the camera there. That is the host name of the camera. So let's go look at the camera and see if we can't change that. I'm going to go ahead and log back into the camera. And let's go into setup, and let's see, configuration, video. It's probably under network, I would imagine, TCP IP. Now the host name is Backyard West. So I don't know why it's getting the incorrect name. Let's go to System, General. There's the device name. So I should be able to change this here. I'm going to do BY-West. And I'm going to save that. And let's do another manual reboot on that. So let's let that reboot. Let's go ahead and refresh. And now you see it's got the correct name on there. So that's how easy it was to get a DHCP reservation. And again, I'm going to go ahead and do that with the rest of the cameras. So let's go do the next one. Now the nice thing about Lansweeper and any other program that tracks your hardware like Lansweeper does is you can sort by type, and I've done that, and I've got all my surveillance cameras in here like this. So let's do 159 next. Let's go, and that's the bench overhead camera. So if we go ahead and highlight the MAC address here, and then we right click on it and choose copy. So this is 159, and it's the bench overhead camera. So let's come back to our domain controller, create a new reservation, and we want this to be at 159. And this is the bench overhead. And we'll paste that MAC address in there. And then very carefully we'll go remove the colons. And we'll call this bench overhead. Remember, the first one is going to inherit whatever the host name is of the camera. So I'm going to go ahead and add that to our reservations and close it. And now let's go out and actually connect to that camera. So here we are at the camera, and it's at 159. So we're going to go ahead and click on the little button to log into it. Log into the camera, and we'll go into the setup here. So let's see, configuration video, we don't need to mess with that. What we do want to do is change our connection under TCP IP to DHCP, and we've already given it a name, a host name of overhead. But I'm going to go ahead and save that. And let's do a manual reboot on that camera. And we'll give it a minute to reboot. Come back to our domain controller here. Go to our address leases. And we'll wait for the camera to reboot. Go ahead and refresh. And its name is overhead_bench.ujp.local. So it's got a reservation now, and that means every time it reboots, it'll get that same IP address every time. Now I would also, not only do you want to do this with something like your security cameras, but I'm also going to do it with things like my Roku players and my, we have TiVo here at the house, so I'm going to do it with all my TiVo devices. My HD home run tuners, anything that is a permanent part of my network that I want to get the same IP address every time I'm going to make a reservation. Now, where I'm not going to use that is for things like our phones or tablets, wireless devices. All right, so there you go. They're all updated now. They're all getting a DHCP reservation. But now I'm going to go back and I'm going to change some of the settings. So I want them to all say camera in the description, then a dash, and then the name of the camera. So I'm going to do this front door. I just like to be, concise. So we'll do this one, camera dash backyard west. So now if we come back here and refresh, so we should now see in the description that they're all identified as cameras now. So good. So there you go. That's complete. Now, in addition to these options over here, scope options over here, you can edit these options. So if you had multiple routers, you could enter them here. Okay. And all you gotta do is right click on them and go to properties. Same way with DNS servers. If you had say you had a backup domain controller with another DNS server, you could list that here. In addition to that, though, you can right click and go to configure options, and you have all of these options available to you. I'm not going to go over what they do, but for example, host name. You could come over here and it says host name for client RFC 1035 character set. One thing I don't like is you can't expand this window out to see what these scopes mean. But anything you're not sure of, you can do a lookup on Google. We used to use Win servers for Windows. You could put them in their NetBIOS scope ID. Some of this stuff is deprecated. Some of it is still in use, like boot server host names and boot file name. When we do our video on Windows deployment server, which I've done before, but I'm going to do another one, you'll see where some of these DHCP options come into play in our lab. But I just wanted to show you that they are there. You have additional options. If you're going to have a Windows domain controller, always an Active Directory domain, I would always recommend you use the built-in DHCP server into Windows Server. It's just going to make your life a whole lot easier and integrate everything there together. Now, in addition to DHCP, you also have DNS, and you have to have, if you've set up a Windows Active Directory domain controller, you have to have a DNS server. So we'll just quickly go over there and show you. I also, if you're in a domain environment, recommend that you use the Windows domain name server. You get your forward, reverse lookup zones, trust zones, conditional forwarders. Because one of the nice things that Windows DNS allows you to do, well, any DNS for that matter, is you could do something called split DNS. So you could even, for example, this is UncleJoe'sPlayhouse.local, and these are all of the hosts under UncleJoe'sPlayhouse.local. So I could right-click here anywhere and add a new host record, and even create an associated PTR record, which is a reverse pointer lookup. But I could also add different domains here. So if I wanted to spoof a domain, since this server is my DNS server that I've given out to all my clients, it's going to go to this server as being the authoritative DNS. So I could, in theory, create a zone in here called Microsoft.com, and anything destined for Microsoft.com would come here to get its information to look up, and I could, in theory, send you to any domain out on the internet. So it's a nice little tool to have. The other thing, if I come up to the root of this server and go to, I think it's properties, yes, then I have forwarders here. So what this means is if my DNS server here locally doesn't know the IP address of something, these are the forwarders I can forward to. So say I had a Pi-hole DNS server, and I wanted that to be the forwarder for anything that my Windows DNS could not resolve. I could put that IP address in here and use that as well. Or I could put, open DNS servers in here, any level 1 servers, anybody I want, I could put in here to be my forwarder, so that anything my Windows DNS server could not resolve would be then forwarded on to those DNS servers. So you've got a lot of power with Windows DNS. All right, so now we're here the next day. I've added some more reservations in addition to the cameras, and that is I have added some reservations for my TiVos, my Rokus, my NVIDIA Shield, and my HD Home Run. And you can see all of them here now have active reservations, except for the NVIDIA Shield. So there you go. I hope it was clear enough the way I described it, and I went into a little more detail than I was going to. I went ahead and showed you other devices on my network. I found it necessary to hard code with a permanent IP address, or to set aside a DHCP reservation. Things like my Rokus, my TiVos, and that kind of thing. Now, a lot of people ask, or a lot of people have commented, why don't you have these on a separate Internet of Things network? Well, I could do that, but I really don't want to complicate my life. If you take precautions to secure your devices, you can have them all on the same network. I could have put all of these cameras on separate VLANs. I could have put all the TiVos and the Rokus on a separate VLAN from my corporate network. And in practice, it's probably not a bad idea to do that. I just don't see a need for that level of complexity here. Now, we might do something like that moving forward with the lab videos, just to show you how that's done. But I like to keep my home network, or my studio network, as simple as possible, and I just find it easier to put everything on one network. So for those of you out there screaming that, no, you're doing it wrong, you should have a separate Internet of Things network, you're probably right. I just don't choose to do mine that way. So as you can see, DHCP reservations can be extremely helpful in organizing your network. And then I use another program, which we'll do a deeper dive into, called Lansweeper, that allows you to track all those devices and sort them and put them in a database and keep notes on them. So we're going to do a deep dive on one of these videos in the Homelab series on how to use Lansweeper. And also we're going to do another video on how to use the Windows admin tool to track all of your Windows machines, whether it be Windows 10 or Windows Server machines, and control them under one interface. One interface to rule them all, so to speak. So we hope you found this video entertaining and informative. As always, please give us a thumbs up down below. Let YouTube algorithms know that you like or dislike the video. It helps. Subscribe if you're not already a subscriber. Donate if you're so inclined. PayPal, Patreon, and the YouTube join function. I want to thank you again for coming to see us, and please don't forget, we'll see all of you on the other side.